Greetings and God bless. I just wanted to share some thoughts about if you're thinking about relocating. Um, of course, look for what is your values. If you're a Bible believer that believes in traditional values and gender roles and homeschooling, you might want to live where that is. Um, Tolerated and where you're safe to do so. And of course, if you're looking for something else, that's probably going to maybe be a little easier. However, being that there's so much instability in the world today, um, it seems to me, it's not enough to just look at who's conservative, uh, because there's been an infiltration, there's been a control that has occurred for decades, and you may want to check in, especially if you're doing a relocation. But if you think you're in a conservative area, if you think you're in a liberty loving, freedom loving area, it's good to make sure that the MacArthur Foundation is not um, doesn't isn't making huge donations, because once the MacArthur Foundation or Soros or any of those big um, organizations get their talons in, um, the community seems to become beholden like a slave. And we fight not flesh and blood, but principalities. So the folks to watch out for is like China buying up, let's say here, because I'm in South Dakota, and apparently China owns a meat packing plant. I think somebody in Brazil owns a meat packing plant. We apparently have four. And then I think Americans own the other two, but maybe not. Like it could be actually all of them are owned internationally and not by Americans. So, when I'm in South Dakota, I thought I was just kind of in, Americana, but no. And some states that you wouldn't think are owned like that have the pensions are invested in like Blackrock or something like that. And it would be, I can't remember the states off the top of my head. If I find it, I'll put it in the description below. But so look at things like, try to find out if there's critical race theory. If you're looking for it, if you're trying to do a more traditional education, if you're trying to do a more Western, what's the terminology? A more classical education. See if they're trying to teach the LGBTP agenda in schools, and also look for the regulations about homeschooling. If you're not, if you want to do homeschooling, so you want to look and see how far things are with this CRT. Are the parents involved? And about Marxism being taught, because what the Marxist believes is no private property for you and me, but it's, of course, it's for the activists, just like we saw with the co-founders buying millions, like 3 properties, 4 properties in behind a gated community. They didn't spend it on the Native Americans. They didn't spend it on the homeless Black people. They didn't spend it on single mothers, single Black mothers, or women of color, or babies and orphans. They didn't do that. No, they bought themselves mansions without any shame, without any conscience. So, just be aware of Marxist presence. That's what I experienced here when I first moved to South Dakota. Like, I was just approached by First Nations people where they told me that I owed them reparations. I never met them before. They don't know my family. They don't know that they came from Denmark or from Eastern Europe. They didn't know, but they made assumptions. And that's really the antithesis of this Michael King, I think. Martin Luther King. Martin wasn't really his birth name wasn't Martin Luther. His first name was, I believe, was Michael. And he was saying his dream was that people were evaluated based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But as of 2022, in my going out, all that matters from at least the Marxist First Nations people that are aggressively panhandling. They all they care about is the color of my skin and the contents of my wallet. Actually, it seems to me. So if you're relocating, just know that just because it seems like it's a conservative location, it doesn't necessarily mean that is the case, because parents are just beginning to fight this critical race theory. They're they're kind of trying to fight, I think, the Marxist stuff, but it's very difficult because the trusted agents of the public good, like the police, I guess their hands are tied or something like that. So, things are not quite as they seem. So I just recommend, like in my description there, you know, is BlackRock, is Vanguard really invested in your area? Soros is Gates. Like apparently Gates, has bought a lot of farmland. So, and I see all these like survival websites, they're like, Montana, blah blah blah. And like I lived in Montana for 6 years, and of course I was in Missoula. Like it's such a liberal stronghold with a chip on its shoulder. It's even more weird. Like it has no, or at least that was my experience, but maybe it's just culture and time, because it seems like everybody's kind of out of their minds when it comes to being a progressive liberal. But I didn't. I found Montana to be shockingly kind of hypocritical, because on one hand, somebody would be all about the environment and uh, ASPCA, but then they'd be a hunter, and I'm like, I'm glad they're a hunter. Actually, I'm glad that they harvested their own food and whatnot. Um, but it was a very strange reality there. So I'm just trying to say that what kind of like the stereotype, the map is not the territory. That is kind of like my realization about life, and things. America has been targeted and infiltrated quite effectively. It seems like the communists, the Marxists, the occultists, the Satanists have been very, very disciplined. They're very organized. They're very persistent. And I think a lot of conservatives or libertarians, we've been dumb. We've been really naive, and I think because like I've kind of been more on the libertarian side since 2000. I don't know, maybe 2006 or like I watched that movie From Freedom to Fascism, and I learned about Ron Paul. But then just recently I learned Ron Paul was a Freemason. His wife is a Eastern Star Freemason. So they're Masons. They're part of the secret society families and whatnot. So that's a disappointing thing. But I was like a libertarian, and I had no idea of the degree of evil that existed. I just thought there were just, I don't know, there was just some corruption. But in, I guess, 2017 or so, I started like, wow, what's up with Michelle Obama? I mean, she just looked like a man. And then all this stuff started coming out about Michelle being a man, and just the whole domino effect of how everybody in the public is the opposite gender because it's a Luciferian ritual called a pan oath, where people have to take the affect of their opposite gender. And it's part of this divine androgyne occult pagan tradition because they think that there's more power in embodying both genders rather than just one. And the reality is that we are so much more powerful when we embrace ourselves as God has created, when we resonate and have affinity with our original chromosomes. So, anyway, my point is that the obvious place is not necessarily uh, um, the safety zone that you might have thought it was. Like for instance, Montana or um, like I think Idaho is a good place, but it's so obvious everybody's heading to Idaho because it's beautiful and it's kind of close to Oregon and California. So sorry about that. So everybody's been flocking there. So real estate is just over the top. And something that's just really disturbing. So I have been looking at rentals and just, seeing housing um, purchasing prices. And it is absolutely insane because people are easily in places like in Wyoming where there's like no work. And, people have $300,000 homes for sale or rentals, for, 1,500 a month. And like, there's not a whole lot of work in Wyoming, and you're not really getting a city's worth experience. And that's what I notice is landlords and I guess property managers are pressuring landlords, or maybe there's just this, um, everybody's trying to keep up with everybody else. So people are charging a ridiculous amount. Like, so their mortgage is maybe $200, and then but they're charging 1,500 for just this place that's nowhere, like that's nothing. And maybe they put a lot of like they did a new design thing, and so they're like, this is a big brand new room, and that's why we're charging you more than you can pay. It's very strange, and I do suspect that people are like, I'll see, just a whatever kind of room for $600. That seems to be like kind of an average thing across the nation, and it's like you're in the middle of nowhere. You're gonna probably have to pay like, for a car to get to that location and get around. And I suspect that people are having the new person pay their rent. I'm wondering if the rent of the place is like $600, but they're having the person moving in pay their own rent as well as their for their room. So what I'm saying is the apartment probably costs $600, and then the person posts an ad and they're renting the second room for $600. So I think like it's some sort of, I mean, I guess they're just they're profiting off of having set up the contract. But I just think that's pretty scummy. Like, I saw an ad on Craigslist and I just looked up it was like this complex of apartments, and so it was like 551, and the guy who was renting his room was charging $400. So the whole flat costs 551, if I read it right. So the guy, and there's three roommates there, so 3 into 500 is like 250, but the guy was doubling the price to rent out his room. So I mean, maybe this is something people have always done, and I'm a slow learner about scamming people. I really don't like to do it. Um, so it just these are just my thoughts that things are not obvious as we would assume, and this is, there have been there's been a war. There's been a deliberate effort, a sustained, disciplined effort to undermine American America and Americana, the heartland, it seems. And perhaps maybe the only place that's not really compromised, I'm feeling like maybe more like Alabama and Mississippi, just like maybe these more, you know, but who knows? Because the poverty there and the drugs there is like a warfare, and I mean, I don't know much about those locations. I haven't been there, um, and it does seem like every city has these pros and cons and significant cons, whether it's weather or homelessness or drugs or lack of affordability. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts. And if you guys have any know-how, like have some light to shine on what preppers, when these preppers are saying move to Idaho or move to Montana or move to South Dakota, like I do not think, for instance, I don't think South Dakota or um, or Idaho. I mean, they're just kind of dry places from what I've seen. I mean, I know Sioux Falls, the east part, there's falls, there's the waterfalls, but like there just does not seem there's not a lot of trees. Like where I'm here in Rapid, there's not a lot of deciduous trees, and it's just a very dry place. And I'm doing some research on Wyoming, and Wyoming also seems kind of like a dry place. And like I don't regard these, and like Montana too, like there's I wouldn't call those places good for food security, because I mean I of course I get stuff at the grocery store, and um like the food, you can find, you'll have bought rotting food, and it's just not being rotated off of the shelves. And this was happening before the CV thing that's been going on, when I was living in Montana. So I don't know, I just figured it was just disgruntled workers not keeping up. Because before then, I'd lived in Oregon, and I never would have rotting carrots. Like this happened a lot with carrots, where the carrots were so old, they had turned gray, or they were so old they had turned to mush. These were just different stores in Missoula, Montana. And, I think people just, I don't know. I don't understand. Maybe it's just improperly trained people getting paid a low wage. So you're just going to have that kind of situation occur. So anyways, I don't really, I don't think, in my opinion, that Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming are like good, farming, gardening kind of a places. But am I wrong? Like, let me know. Let me know in the comments. But like, I just think places with more foliage and grass would be places. And I'm not saying. I mean, like, of course, things are growing on farms and ranches, and that's great. I mean, I think it's great to be around where there's a lot of, buffalo and elk being raised, and lamb and chickens, and pork. So I think all of that is great. And maybe that's doable, but it's just, I don't know. I didn't see a whole lot of garden. Like I don't see a whole lot of gardening here in Rapid City. And I didn't see a lot in Montana, and from what I'm looking at in Wyoming, not there either. Like what gardening I saw that was really just like for real, was Oregon. Oregon really knocked it out of the park. Just there was just so many things growing, and a lot of variety. And I would assume that would be the case for Seattle. And I would think, like, so the West Coast seems like good for gardening, and I would say the East Coast as well. And I'm taking a look at like Wisconsin and Michigan. That seems good. I would say Idaho, of course. Everybody's going to Idaho, um, so those are my thoughts. And I don't, like, and people are talking about North Dakota. And I had a friend who moved to North Dakota, and she was like, "This is just the worst place." She had moved from Montana to North Dakota, and like, so Montana is not like all that great. So I was just like, well, if she didn't like North Dakota, then North Dakota must be really bad. But I don't know. So let me know if anybody else is watching this and has any thoughts about North Dakota. So, anyways, hopefully this makes sense and helps somebody. Thank you for listening, and God bless.